This mystery is really getting mysterious.
City police have been engaged in an intensive hunt for a man known as the .44 caliber killer. He's suspected of already murdering 4 women and 1 man, and there's widespread apprehension that his crime spree is not over. Sam Ford reports.
The first victim was killed in front of her Bronx apartment building last July 29th. She was 18-year-old Donna Loria, who was sitting in a parked car with a friend late at night when her parents heard the shots.
My wife comes screaming in the hall. They were shot. I ran down. By the time I got down, she was dead in the street. And that was it. There was nobody around.
Since that first shooting, the killer has struck 5 more times. In all, 9 persons have been shot, 5 of them killed. Most of the victims have been young women with shoulder-length dark brown hair who were gunned down as they sat in parked cars or walked the sidewalks of the Bronx and Queens. Police ballistics experts say a Bulldog .44 caliber pistol similar to this one was used in all the shootings. Identifying the killer is a lot more difficult. Police have no less than 5 composites of a man described as being white, of medium build, and between 20 and 35 years old. Because of the difficulty of this case, the New York Police Department has formed a 30-detective task force to work exclusively on finding this killer. Hundreds of leads have come from the public.
We have an advantage. We have experience, and he doesn't have an advantage. He's doing something that's a compulsion, we feel, and that compulsion is going to lead him to be caught.
Believing the killer to be psychotic, police have their psychologists working on the case as well.
The victim that's selected usually satisfies something on a fantasy level. A punishing mother, could be a wife, and he selects somebody that has certain qualities, and so every time he commits the crime against a person that has this thing, he's satisfying this basic need of getting back at the original individual that he had difficulty with.
In the communities where the killer has struck, people have become more cautious about traveling at night. Some merchants say business is down.
People wouldn't come out at night. They're really scared. And I mean, when they're scared, that's all they do is talk about the killer.
Some women in the area are terrified, particularly ones with shoulder-length dark brown hair who didn't want their faces on camera.
People going out cutting their hair and dyeing it, you know, because they know we like shoulder-length hair, or wearing their hair up, or wearing scarves. That's the truth, really.
I won't walk home anymore in the dark. It's just scary. It's frightening. You don't know what's going to happen.
Civilian patrolling has been stepped up in the neighborhoods. In the Bronx, the patrol now watches some streets until 4 a.m. And among the volunteers is the first victim's father, Mike Loria.
This guy deserves to die. And it's just the way I feel. My daughter was 18 years old, and that's what he took out of my heart, 18 years. And I hope they get him. I really, really do.
Officially, police say they are confident they will catch the killer, that it is just a matter of time. However, privately, some say they fear that someone else's time may run out before the killer's does. Sam Ford, CBS News.
In New York early this morning, a mystery deepened and a manhunt intensified. A young couple was shot and wounded while sitting in a parked car. The weapon, a .44 caliber pistol. Police believe it was the work of the man called the .44 caliber killer and wanted for murdering 4 young women and a young man on quiet residential streets in the city. All of the women had long brown hair, as did an intended victim last night. Her condition is critical, her companion's is satisfactory. Some neighborhoods in New York now have citizen patrols, a response to the .44 caliber killings which began 11 months ago. There are similar patrols out in California, but for another reason. Bernard Goldberg tells us why.
This is the CBS Evening News with Morton Dean.
Good evening. In New York early this morning, the .44 caliber killer tried to kill again and almost did. His latest victims, a young couple, were hospitalized in critical condition. The gunman first struck a year and 2 days ago. Since then, he has taunted police and written to a newspaper columnist warning he would strike again, and he always has. The latest story from Jim Kilpatrick.
Stacy Moskowitz, 20 years old, blonde. Robert Violante, also age 20, both shot twice in the head as they sat in their car near the ocean in the Brooklyn section of New York. It was their first date. They had been to a movie earlier. At least 2 witnesses say the gunman walked up to the car, crouched, then fired 4 shots through the open window. The area is not isolated, and the commotion immediately attracted neighbors.
I was covered with blood, and the girl was covered with blood. It was a horror. This guy screaming, just screaming and screaming.
Police believe the gunman reached the car by walking through this park. He is described as a 5'7" male of medium build, wearing dungarees. Authorities also believe he made his escape the same way, running back through the park and into a car on a limited access road. Authorities now say the bullets were fired from the same gun that has already killed 5 people and wounded 6 in the past year. How close are police to finding the psychopathic killer who calls himself Son of Sam?
This guy. Well, we do have a description of someone who saw him. I'm hopeful that will be helpful, but if you're asking whether we have any indication of who he is or where he might be, the answer is no. Thank you.
Somewhat from the previous 7. First, all of the prior attacks have been in the Bronx or Queens sections of New York. This one was in Brooklyn. Earlier theories were the killer shot only at long-haired brunettes. Police say that is an exaggeration. One was virtually blonde, others wore their hair short, and Stacy Moskowitz was also blonde.
Was she worried? She wasn't worried, you know, because she says, you know, I got blonde hair, and, you know, I told her I don't know how many times to be careful.
Stacy lived in a quiet section of Brooklyn. Most neighbors were afraid to appear on camera today, fearing for their own lives. However, one person did, but asked his name not be used.
She's always, you know, saying, hello, how are you? How's your wife? How's the baby? And so forth. But I'm still in a state of shock, really.
Police have used hundreds of officers, psychiatrists, and hypnotists in the search for the gunman. Patrols were increased in what were considered likely areas. Authorities have received thousands of tips. One call came to this precinct last Wednesday saying Son of Sam would strike Thursday near Coney Island. The date was wrong, but the location was correct. Jim Kilpatrick, CBS News, Brooklyn.
300 New York police officers looking for a man they call the .44 caliber killer today have a little more to go on. Jim Kilpatrick has the story.
For almost a year, New York police have been working with at least 5 drawings of the .44 caliber killer who calls himself Son of Sam. He was generally described as white, between 20 and 35 years old. Now, Son of Sam has a new face, a police drawing which is described as the most accurate eyewitness resemblance so far. Police describe the killer as clean-shaven, with dark, wavy hair, high cheekbones, and a sensuous mouth. At a news conference, New York police depict him as a woman-hating killer, between 25 and 32, with a good athletic build, weighing around 165 pounds. The drawing is considered important because the description comes from eyewitnesses who were at the scene but not under fire. Previous sketches came from frightened victims.
Quite obviously, we can't take that sketch and go out and pick out the person we're looking for. But it helps us in the sense that a person in the general public or some friend of his may be able to come forward and say, this looks like the man we're looking for.
Authorities say they cannot determine the killer's nationality or ethnic background. And even with the new drawing, police would not say they are any closer to finding the killer, only that they have a better description. Jim Kilpatrick, CBS News, New York.
The 44 is a big gun with a big kick. To fire it, you hold on tight with 2 hands and brace yourself or it could knock you down. Experts think it is a gun like this, one of the 28,000 Bulldog 44 revolvers manufactured by the Charter Arms Company of Hartford that the New York City killer is using. The chamber holds 5 bullets. He usually fires 4 shots. One theory is he's saving the 5th one in case he needs it for himself. The 44 bullet is big, nearly twice as big as the conventional 38 caliber police handgun ammunition. The 44 is designed, they say, to kill.
It expends all its energy inside the body, thereby being the ultimate in a man-stopper.
A man-stopper?
In other words, for police work, if a man was attacking you and you fired at him with this, chances are he'd go down immediately, whereas if you hit him with a 38, it wouldn't be as efficient. He might have enough energy left to be, to get on you and do you some damage.
In New York, all gun and ammunition sales must be registered. But in this store, nobody's bought any 44 caliber ammo for a long time. The dealer says people seem to be avoiding it now. Charles Osgood, CBS News, New York.
In New York City, the police have expanded the search for the man they call the 44 caliber killer and who calls himself the son of Sam. The man struck again yesterday morning following his usual pattern of shooting at couples in parked cars. This time, both people were hit in the head. 20-year-old Stacy Moskowitz is in critical condition after 2 brain operations. Robert Violante, who's also 20, has lost one eye and may lose all or some of the vision in the other. Jim Kilpatrick has a report on the gunman and his victims.
Ballistics has confirmed that the caliber used is the same one used in the other cases known as the son of Sam.
It was his 8th attack in little more than a year, leaving 5 New Yorkers dead and 8 injured. The couple was on its first date. After a movie, they parked near the ocean. The pattern was the same as in some of the other shootings. The gunman fired into the couple's car. The bullet struck Robert Violante and his 20-year-old date, Stacy Moskowitz, in the head. At the hospital, Robert Violante's father recalled how he had warned his son to stay out of the potential trouble spots.
We brought him up the right way. Good boy, never any trouble, never involved in any dope, never involved in any arrests. I told him to stay out of Queens. He says, Dad, I'm going to stay out of Queens, because he used to go to Queens. He says, I'll do it for you and Mom. I'll hang around in Brooklyn. And that's where they found him.
The early morning shooting in Brooklyn was son of Sam's first in that New York borough. The other 7 shootings all in Queens and the Bronx. Police now fear the killer could strike anywhere in the city. During the past year, police have been working with 5 sketches, all different somehow. Authorities may now have a break. There were eyewitnesses Sunday morning. Son of Sam was described as a white male, about 5'7", 25 to 30 years old. Police will only say they are hopeful. Jim Kilpatrick, CBS News, Brooklyn.
20-year-old Stacy Moskowitz was the 6th person killed in little more than a year. She was shot in the head at close range, as was her boyfriend, 20-year-old Robert Violante, who lost sight in his left eye but is expected to live.
Since last winter, a special police task force has worked exclusively on this case. The staff has grown with each shooting incident, from 180 by last week to more than 300 today. Staff members have answered thousands of phone calls and checked out thousands of leads, but so far, progress has not been encouraging.
The witnesses so far have been very scant and very poor descriptions, or in most cases, no witnesses. The physical evidence has been limited to the fact that we know it's the same gun. And that's all. And the motive is a complete mystery to us.
The only substantial clues so far have been 2 letters, including one mailed to the New York Daily News, where the killer calls himself the son of Sam and implies that he is compelled to kill. Police also have a number of composite drawings based on descriptions from victims and witnesses. But police admit they are not much closer to catching the killer today than they were before the most recent shootings. Sam Ford, CBS News, New York.
At 5:22 p.m. Monday, Stacy Moskowitz stopped living. The doctors said they had not turned off the life support. It was just that the horrible damage done by a .44 caliber bullet in the brain was too much. 40 minutes after their daughter died, the parents spoke to reporters.
And even though I lost so dear, I found many friends who I'll never forget. And I thank you for being kind and for your sympathies.
I hope he suffers for the rest of his life. I hope he never has a minute's peace. I hope he suffers and just eats his heart out with a cancer. Because he's nothing, he's not human. He's not human. To do this to a young girl and a young boy. If I lost a child, that woman has a son that's blind. To do this to young people, he can't be normal. He's not normal. And I would give anything. I would give my life right here and now. My daughter is dead, but I would die right here and now to see this man punished.
The city is preoccupied with the killer, who in one note signed himself the Son of Sam. The latest victims were shot in Brooklyn, a new area for the assailant. An element of fear pervades neighborhoods which have not known fear before.
And it's something that we all have to worry about.
What is your wife saying?
She wouldn't even come out tonight. You know, she cried tonight when she heard that the girl died. Stacy Morris died. And, you know, I said that I was going to take her right out and see what the feeling was out here, and she didn't even want to come. She doesn't want to leave the house until he's caught. She wants to stay home because she's frightened.
A beefed-up task force of 300 is working on the case now, sifting for clues, manning telephones, answering a flood of 8,000 calls in just one day. The one common element to the shootings is a gun, a 5-shot .44 caliber revolver made by Charter Arms, one of some 28,000 manufactured. Bullets in all the attacks have come from the same weapon. Whoever holds that weapon has killed 6 people and wounded 7 in 1 year and 3 days. The police have a composite sketch of their suspect compiled from witnesses' descriptions. But no one in the city of 8 million knows who is next. Reed Collins, CBS News, New York.
I make a run in the house. I said, hurry up, run in the house.
You want her inside, huh?
No, you know, just to be safe. And I'm looking over my shoulder in the car, you know. Just, you know, take no chances.
Getting home.
We used to stay in front of my house and parking, you know, and kiss goodnight, but we can't do that no more. Yeah. Just go right in.
Even if it were well lit, even if it were a spot that you didn't think...
Well, the last time the girl was killed, Stacy, she was underneath a lamplight, wasn't she?
Mr. Gasper, I guess you're seeing the same commotion we're seeing. Have you seen it like this in your neighborhood before?
Not anything like this.
No.
I think there's just a lot of, you know, hysteria, and I think people are really shook up bad.
Why did you come out here tonight?
Well, I saw the lights, and I just passed by just to look at it again. I just can't believe it. You know, that it happens right here in the neighborhood. You hear about these things, and, you know, when it hit Queens and the Bronx, you say, oh, well, you know, it happened over there. Yeah. And you just hope that, you know, it didn't happen here. But it did.
We ready?
That's a question New Yorkers have been asking themselves a lot lately. Are we ready for another blackout, or a bus hijacking, or a bombing, or another murder by the .44 caliber killer?
I know that I'm not usually known for any public exhibitions of temper, but I want you to know I'm damned angry. During the last few weeks, New Yorkers have been subjected to a series of criminal outrages which are unmatched in recent memory.
The summer of '77 won't be easily forgotten by New Yorkers. For one thing, there's a killer on the loose. He calls himself Son of Sam, and during the past year, he has killed 6 people with his .44 caliber revolver. Police say they are nowhere near solving the case. One newspaper went so far as to report today that even the New York Mafia is trying to track the killer down. Police Commissioner Michael Codd.
No, I read the paper too. That's all I know about it.
And police are trying to find those responsible for 2 bombings yesterday in Manhattan office buildings. There were more bomb scares today, but no explosions. They have arrested one suspect, believed to be affiliated with the FALN, the radical group which claims responsibility for yesterday's bombings. And then there was the widespread looting and arson during the city's blackout 3 weeks ago. Today, the Federal Power Commission issued its preliminary report and blamed Consolidated Edison, the city's power supplier.
The FPC is simply wrong in questioning of Con Edison's ability to provide reliable service. Our service is extremely reliable.
For many New Yorkers, it has been a sad thing watching as the city copes with crisis after crisis.
I know what it is to walk around in my childhood without any problems and happy-go-lucky and go where I want, but no longer like that. You have to look over your shoulder, and I find people, when you're walking, people just look over their shoulder.
The other night, 150,000 people gathered in Central Park to watch a concert by the New York Philharmonic. There were no reported injuries. Gary Shepard, CBS News, New York.
At about 1 this morning, 24-year-old David Berkowitz, who detectives believe is the son of Sam, was brought to police headquarters in Manhattan. He was wearing frayed jeans and an open sports shirt, and he was smiling slightly. Berkowitz, a Postal Service employee, had been arrested a few hours earlier in Yonkers, a city of 150,000 north of New York. Berkowitz's car, a cream-colored Ford, turned out to be the key to his arrest. Incredibly, police say what led them to Berkowitz was a ticket for parking illegally at a hydrant near the site of the last murder, July 31st.
One of the many leads that was followed was in checking cars which had been parked in the vicinity, general vicinity of the homicide in Brooklyn. One of the cars checked proved to be this car, which was parked in front of his house in Yonkers. In the car, the detectives observed the butt of a machine gun, and also a letter which had the exact writing as the previous letters.
I can see this through the window, sir?
You could see that through the window.
Found in the car and Berkowitz's apartment were an arsenal of weapons, including a .44 caliber Bulldog revolver. Also, another chilling poem which reads in part, "Because Craig is Craig, so must the streets be filled with Craig," and huge drops of lead poured down upon her head until she was dead. Police ran ballistics tests this morning on the .44 caliber gun they say Berkowitz bought from someone else who got it in Texas.
The ballistics section has just called and told us that the .44 caliber gun recovered tonight has been tested, and the bullets match the bullets recovered from Stacy Moskowitz.
What about the other victims?
That'll take some more time.
What does this mean?
It means we have the gun to kill Stacy Moskowitz.
Detectives report that when they arrested Berkowitz, he did not resist and said, "Okay, you got me." He was held overnight and questioned prior to arraignment this morning, apparently ending one of the greatest manhunts ever conducted by the New York City Police. Steve Young, CBS News, New York. About 4 hours after David Berkowitz was brought to police headquarters in Manhattan, police said ballistics tests conclusively proved that the .44 caliber Bulldog revolver found in his car was the weapon used to kill the son of Sam's last victim, Stacy Moskowitz. Police artists had drawn several composites of what they thought son of Sam looked like. It turned out that he most closely resembled the first sketch. There was a key witness. Police refused to identify her, a woman who says she saw police officers ticket Berkowitz's car the night of the last murder after hearing shots and being approached by a man with a dark object in his hand. The woman was afraid she might be stalked by son of Sam and waited 4 days before contacting police. Berkowitz lived in Yonkers, north of New York. Police searching his apartment found one or more notes in the same handwriting as earlier son of Sam messages. Police described him as a loner. His neighbors discussed their impressions with CBS News correspondent Bill McLaughlin.
He seemed strange to you?
Not strange. When he came in, you know, he spoke what's happening and everything, but...
He was friendly then?
Yeah, he didn't seem strange. I never suspect him in this building. Out of every building in Yonkers, he's in 35 Pine Street. You know, that shocks me. Can't believe it.
Berkowitz worked for the Postal Service in the Bronx. An official told CBS News this morning he would not initiate conversations, but would speak if spoken to. No one could recall his ever asking a female co-worker for a date. Berkowitz's mother is dead. His father, now retired, lives in Miami. He has a sister living in New York. So far, police have not identified her. When he was arrested, he reportedly told police, "Okay, you got me." According to ballistics tests, apparently they do. Steve Young, CBS News, New York.
David Berkowitz, now in jail where he can do no harm. But he is still a human question mark. Who is David Berkowitz, and what made him, as the police allege, the son of Sam? We know very little. This is where he lived, an interracial community overlooking the Hudson River in Yonkers, New York. He lived on the 7th floor at 35 Pine Street. His 70 apartment is now sealed by the police. His neighbors knew very little about David Berkowitz.
I woke up this morning and my mother said to me that the son of Sam lived upstairs from us on the 7th floor. And I said, are you kidding? She said that she had remembered riding in the elevator with him. I don't remember seeing him. I may have seen him in the building because a lot of people come in and out. But I don't think that picture looked anything like him.
Well, I spoke to him a couple of times in the elevator and in the lobby, but I could never guess, that he would be the guy because he seems to me a normal guy.
We have labels, places, and dates about David Berkowitz, but few explanations. He graduated from Christopher Columbus High School in the Bronx, where, as far as we know, he left no lasting impression. He appeared to skate on the surface of life. After high school, he was a trainee auxiliary policeman, but did not carry a gun. Where did he learn about weapons?
Berkowitz was an auxiliary policeman from 70 to 73. He received normal training in law and in unarmed defense. He did not receive firearms training.
Where did he learn how to shoot? Do we know yet?
I don't know. As I said, subsequent to that period in 1973, he was in the military service, and a normal concomitant of military service would have been training in firearms.
Berkowitz joined the Army in June 1971. He won a sharpshooter's medal for expertise with an M16 rifle, but was not a good pistol shot by the Army standards. He served 3 years, including 1 year as an infantryman in Korea. He was demoted once. We don't know exactly why. It now appears that his name at birth was not Berkowitz. He was adopted by Mr. Berkowitz and his late wife in 1954. As a young man, he had a series of odd jobs: security guard, cab driver, nothing permanent in this elusive life. Then Berkowitz tried higher education. He enrolled as a liberal arts major at Bronx Community College, but dropped out after 6 months. Again, he seems to have left no memories. Berkowitz started work as a clerk at a federal post office in the Bronx in April 1976. A few months later, the killings began. The people who knew him said that David Berkowitz moved through his life mostly unnoticed, almost invisible. As for his inner life, the clues are few. Letters decorated with mysterious signs and poetry of a sort. But there are 6 young people dead, and police think David Berkowitz killed them. Bill McLaughlin, CBS News, New York.
The capture of the son of Sam was banner news all over Europe. The Vatican Daily headlined the story, Figlio di Sam. The London Daily News ran a 4-column head next to the suspect's picture, which read, Smile of the mass killer. And in Paris, Francois declared, New York can breathe again.
Text, or perhaps show us facsimiles of any of the letters.
I have one right here. I'll just give you an idea. It starts off, My Master. This is the one that was received Saturday. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right.
You can speak.
Okay.
Can you read us some of
Yes, I will. My master, Craig, you will be punished. Craig, how dare you force me into the night to do your bidding? I promise you, Craig, that the world shall spit on you and your mother. I shall see you standing naked at the judgment seat. Upon your condemnation, the world shall rise in jubilation. The terrible, wicked Craig is dead, they shall shout.
How well did you know?
The streets have been filled with blood, Glassman, per your request, and signed your brother. What does that mean to you, Mr. Glassman? This was received Saturday.
Right, August, well, it was received August 4th.
August 4th, that was received.
It was a yellow Ford with a black vinyl top, license plate 561XLB. And I'd looked in the car, I looked in the back seat, I noticed a duffel bag, and it seemed that there was like a butt of a rifle, something along that line. I then proceeded to look in the front seat. There was like an envelope on the floor that was stuffed with yellow manila paper. It seemed like possibly a letter. So at that time, I started to walk away from the vehicle, and by that time, I got maybe 10 feet away, and 10 police officers jumped out and said, "Are you Dave Berkowitz?" At that time, I said, "No." I, identified myself as a deputy sheriff from the county of Westchester, and at that time, they asked me, "Do you know David Berkowitz?" Then I explained the whole story to them, and they said, "Well, have you, seen him?" And I said, yes, I did, because I'd seen him that morning, you know, physically seen him, passed him by in a car. He was sitting on some side street. I had gotten a good look at him. So they said, would you do us a favor and help us out? You know, we feel we don't have enough manpower here. We're waiting for more men to come. You know, seeing that you know him, would you sit with our, you know, two of our officers, a Sergeant Gardella and another officer? And we sat in their unmarked car down the block, about 3 cars up from his car. We sat there. It was approximately 8:30. Within about 15 minutes.
Excuse me. I think at that point we already agreed that there was areas he could not make statements.
Can you tell us, have you been inside the apartment and what did you see there if you have?
Craig, now that it's over and you know how closely this man was either watching you or aware of you, how do you feel?
I feel quite relieved. I was, you know, I ended up having to sleep, you know, with my gun in my hand or another gun under my pillow.
During the time you were getting
Yes, but during the time I was getting, especially after I got the second 2 letters and the fire had occurred.
You seem to have represented to him a symbol of authority, if we can get in that sort of psychological speculation at the moment.
A Brooklyn grand jury will begin considering evidence later this morning in the Son of Sam case. District Attorney Eugene Gold says he expects indictments for second-degree murder, attempted murder, assault, and illegal possession of a firearm by the end of the day. It turns out Berkowitz acquired his .44 caliber revolver in June of last year in Houston, Texas, 1 month before the first murder by Son of Sam. It was purchased at this pawn shop by an old Army buddy he was visiting. The accused killer is now undergoing a court-ordered psychological examination at the Kings County Medical Center in Brooklyn, where he will be held in maximum security for up to 30 days.
It will engage in a normal psychiatric examination, which consists of conversation and observation to try to understand whether or not he understands the charges against him and can assist in his defense.
David Berkowitz spent a lot of time as a youngster with 2 friends, Jeff and Lenny. They refused to show their faces on camera, but they did agree to talk about their former companion with Ellen Fleischer of station WCBS-TV in New York.
I knew a very quiet man, a very shy man, a very sensitive man. A man who was more interested in helping people. He was an auxiliary police officer. He aspired to become a fireman when he came out of the service. He went into the service and a drastic change took place and a different man came out than went in.
What do you mean a different man went out? How did he change?
A man that went in relatively mellow, relatively peaceful, turned around and became a man that was more interested in the fantasy in the world than the reality. There was a very strong reality fantasy conflict.
At his arraignment, Berkowitz was ordered held without bail. His defense attorney says he is seriously considering a plea of not guilty because of insanity. Gary Shepard, CBS News, New York.
In New York today, the man accused of committing the .44 caliber killings was being tested to see whether he can stand trial. Steve Young reports.
David Berkowitz, the accused .44 caliber killer, is expected to spend at least the next 2 weeks undergoing a battery of psychiatric tests at Kings County Hospital in Brooklyn. The director of forensic psychiatry at the institution plans to spend hours talking with the suspect.
We will try to evaluate whether or not this gentleman is suffering from any mental disease or defect, and if so, whether or not that interferes with his ability to understand the proceedings against him and assist in his defense.
Berkowitz is being confined alone in a room large enough for 3 under 24-hour guard. Hospital officials are locking and double-locking all stairwell doors because a band of youths stood outside the hospital last night shouting, "We want Sam." Pictures were published today of Berkowitz's apartment in Yonkers. They suggest someone living in a state of emotional turbulence. The photos and the sensational disclosures of what went on during police interrogations of Berkowitz led to concern today that the suspect's lawyers could challenge the apparent abundance of evidence against him on grounds of unfair pretrial publicity. One of his court-appointed lawyers sought to obtain a gag order against the police commissioner and Mayor Abraham Beame for not restraining the flow of information from police.
I am not a gagger. And the police department, in my judgment, knows how to handle themselves.
Late this afternoon, a New York Supreme Court judge ruled the application for a gag order is premature since a grand jury has not yet returned an indictment against the man believed to be the son of Sam. Steve Young, CBS News, New York.
Son of Sam was a big story for everybody, but it was even bigger for Jimmy Breslin. That's because the killer chose Breslin as his conduit to a larger public. Soon, both of them had made it to a chosen spot, the front page. Alexander Coburn of the Village Voice is one media critic who has questioned Jimmy Breslin's Son of Sam coverage, especially Breslin's use of a letter apparently sent him by David Berkowitz.
You said in one of your columns, you said when discussing this matter, whether you should have published the letter, you talked about the danger of self-censorship, and I think the history of this sees that it's not a matter of self-censorship, it's a matter of seeing what you're actually doing in journalism in creating what I thought was one of the most disgusting episodes I've seen in journalism, which is pandering to this whole the series of murders over the summer and into the fall.
Do you, I mean, you're suggesting that murder isn't a big story? Is that your opinion?
I think murder, as the story became in the papers, it was blown ludicrously out of proportion and with very unhealthy social results.
What were the unhealthy social results?
I think the present mayor-elect, Mr. Koch, advocating capital punishment in certain cases.
Ed Koch has been advocating capital punishment for some time, and he didn't.
Yeah, but why do you think it took off on that particular occasion?
Well, Abe Beam, you yourself noted that Abe Beam did try to ride this story a little bit.
Abe Beam started it by coming in, started the political aspect of it by coming in. But at this time, you know, you've got to remember here, this man had killed 5 people before anyone took any notice of the fact that the murders were connected, before, in fact, ballistics was able to put the thing together. That's one. Two, there have been, if there's one thing I learned out of this, it's that we covered this as I would cover it again. I mean, I don't care if it's a murder. That's goes through the ages. That's Shakespeare wrote about them. How many times have there been lunatics loose in the black community and they've killed just as Berkowitz did, 6 and 7, and we took no note of it at all? I mean, that's the thing I learned out of this, to start watching up there. They, in neighborhoods where the poor people live, this was common.
I agree, and I think that's a very valid point. But to stick to this case in point, what about the predictive aspects of, let's say, the column on Death Day, on the anniversary of the shooting of the first victim? Did you ever have a flash after Bobby Violante and Stacy Moskowitz were killed 36 hours after Death Day? Did you ever have a moment saying, geez, did I cause this? Did this column trigger this nut?
No.
Never
and
occurred to you as a
in reading the psychiatric report on Berkowitz, it just would when it's released finally, it'll just reinforce that too. I mean, he just was going out 30 nights a month looking for someone to kill. And he would look at a face that's every night of the week.
And yet the news media and the mayor combined to make that night, the night of the 29th of July, into a kind of special night. And this, as you say, from a killer who previously hadn't shown any chronological pattern. Is that like taunting the guy into action?
No, I don't think it was taunting. I mean, this man had just been going out looking to kill at all times. And where did it begin? It started with him writing about it, the 29th. He was the one that brought up the date. He was the one that impressed the police, and that most of the psychiatrists seemed to think that that was a date that was an important date.
You mentioned the police, and Alec, you had mentioned the police in the column, that this is the kind of story in which reporters have to work with the police in ways that I know you found very troubling.
There was no outward sign of emotion, no expressed remorse today as David Berkowitz pleaded guilty in a Brooklyn, New York court to 6 random Son of Sam murders, slayings which terrorized New York for more than a year. But there was a surprise at today's court proceedings, as Bill McLaughlin reports.
There was more than enough security to protect the self-styled Son of Sam for his one, and as it turned out, only day of judgment in court. Some of the parents of the 6 young people David Berkowitz has confessed to killing were also on hand. Because of security reasons and to save the state time and money, 3 different judges, one from each of the New York boroughs where the murders took place, consecutively heard the testimony. First, the defense lawyers declared that Berkowitz was now acting against their advice by pleading guilty to all the charges against him. Then the judges carefully led Berkowitz, who seemed calm and spoke in a monotone, through a series of questions to establish his guilt and his ability to understand what was happening to him. Why did you go to Brooklyn that night? To kill somebody, answered Berkowitz. What did you do when you saw the couple in the car? I shot them. How many times? 5 times. Did you mean to cause them bodily harm? No, I meant to kill them. There was one unexpected development. Berkowitz's lawyers handed over to the court his diaries, in which he claimed to have set about 2,000 fires in the Bronx from 1974 until his arrest in 1977. The plea of guilty was accepted, and the judges will pronounce sentence in 2 weeks. Afterwards, Mrs. Nasa Moskowitz, mother of one of the victims, spoke with correspondent Mitchell Krauss.
I hate him as much as anyone can hate anybody. He not only killed my daughter, he destroyed my family, other families. As far as I'm concerned, my house will never be the same. And he just robbed a lot of people of a lot of things.
You think justice can be done in this case?
Not unless they bring back the death penalty, and he burns for it.
David Berkowitz may spend the rest of his life behind bars.
Given the number of crimes that he has committed, he may spend, in fact, more than one lifetime. But the judges still face one problem: where to put him, in a normal prison or in an institution. Bill McLaughlin, CBS News at the State Supreme Court in Brooklyn.
Shortly after he arrived at the Brooklyn courthouse, Berkowitz bit a guard badly enough to send him to the hospital as several guards stopped him from lunging toward a 7th-floor window. 90 minutes late, he made a wild entrance into the courtroom, looking straight at Mrs. Nisa Moskowitz, mother of one of his 6 murder victims, Stacy Moskowitz. To a weird, nursery rhyme-like tune, Berkowitz, who had never known Stacy Moskowitz, sang, "Stacy was a whore." Mrs. Moskowitz bolted out of her seat and screamed back, "You animal." That's right, Berkowitz replied in a whining voice. And then Robert Violante, Stacy's date the night she died, who was also shot by Berkowitz and lost an eye, rose and shouted, "You creep." After a recess, judges from the 3 boroughs where the murders occurred took the bench one at a time. The first quoted the last psychiatric report. It seemed to predict today's events. "Do you know what will happen during sentencing?" Berkowitz is asked. Then the psychiatrist's comment, Berkowitz's mood changes once again. Now his face lights up, his eyes twinkle. "I know, but I'm not telling." To a suggestion that there be another psychiatric evaluation in view of today's turmoil, a friend of the Moskowitz family bristled, stood, and shouted, "It's not justice. What about the families? They're human." Applause rolled over the courtroom. When a second judge spoke of delaying sentencing, another of Berkowitz's victims, Donna DeMasi, who was shot in the neck, shouted to the judge, "It should happen to you what happened to me." Later, she was cynical about Berkowitz's courtroom behavior.
I felt like killing. I felt like scratching his eyes out. Because it was an act, that's why.
And Robert Violante explained his courtroom outburst.
Total anger. That's it, just total outrage, and I really couldn't control myself.
Bronx District Attorney Mario Marola argued with the judge from his borough. This court has to bite the bullet and sentence him today. The district attorney's argument that psychiatric examinations could go on forever did not persuade the bench. Another examination was ordered and sentencing was delayed until June 12th. Steve Young, CBS News at Brooklyn Supreme Court. 3 weeks after his wild courtroom outburst, which led to a delay for further psychiatric evaluation, David Berkowitz, again judged competent to face sentencing, arrived to learn his fate. As before, Berkowitz was handcuffed, but this time his arms were bound in front of him by a strap cinched tightly around his waist. In contrast to his last appearance, Berkowitz meekly answered questions from the 3 presiding judges. The Associated Press, quoting an unnamed courtroom source, said Berkowitz had been sedated, but this could not be confirmed. After the first judge had handed down 2 sentences of 25 years to life for murder, Daniel Carrick, a friend of one of the murder victims, vaulted forward toward Berkowitz, shouting, "You're going to burn in hell." Carrick was carried out of the courtroom. The last judge, seeking to establish that Berkowitz had freely confessed to all 6 murders, asked about the demons Berkowitz has described. "Did the power of the demons make you plead guilty?" "They had some influence," said Berkowitz, but he maintained he had made the decision on his own. Berkowitz, who just turned 25, was given a total of 6 sentences for murder of 25 years to life. One of the judges said, "It is my earnest wish that the defendant be in prison until the day of his death." But under the law, David Berkowitz may apply for parole in 25 years. Steve Young, CBS News.
There's been another strange turn in the Son of Sam case, an allegation that a lawyer who interviewed the suspect later tried to sell tapes of the conversation for thousands of dollars. We have a report on that and other developments in the story from Don Kladstrom.
According to the New York Daily News, the sale was pushed by Philip Peltz, a lawyer claiming to represent David Berkowitz.
Peltz, through an associate, is said to have approached several publishers unsuccessfully, offering tape-recorded conversations with Berkowitz. The asking price? $50,000. The tapes allegedly were made by Peltz and another lawyer, Ira Littell, at the hospital where Berkowitz is undergoing psychiatric testing. What did Berkowitz say on the tapes?
Mr. Littell told us, gave us information that he spoke about the killings, that he spoke about sexual references in the tapes, and really was pandering the tapes to us, suggesting that there was all kinds of newsy things that we would be interested in.
Why did you turn it down?
Well, the fact is, it was deemed to be inappropriate. The kind of things that you would get from a defense attorney talking to his client prior to even an indictment is not the kind of things we deem to be publishable.
Last night, after the judge's ruling, Peltz refused to comment on the matter or to say much about his own background, which includes a criminal record.
Were you in fact convicted in 1969 in a stock fraud case, and didn't you do 4 months' time in Allenwood Penitentiary?
Your statement is not entirely accurate.
Well, where's the inaccuracy? Can you explain the inaccuracies for us? You better do it.
The inaccuracy is in the time, and in that you label it stock fraud.
What was it? It was bribery, wasn't it?
No, it was not bribery.
Well, what were you charged with?
What was I charged with, or what was I convicted of?
What were you charged with?
I don't think the charges are pertinent.
Well, what were you convicted of?
4 counts. 3 are violations of the security laws, and 1 of conspiracy relating to them.
How Peltz came to represent Berkowitz is a mystery. It is Leon Stern who's been hired by Berkowitz's father to represent his son.
Well, I trust that David Berkowitz will become my client.
How do you feel how will you go about trying to achieve that?
Well, we're going to see David, and we're going to have the father see David.
Today, Berkowitz's 68-year-old father held an emotional news conference to try to explain, to try to reach out to those his son allegedly hurt.
At this time, my loss is not because of one son that I adopted, but my loss is multiplied by what each and every one of the parents of these crimes feel in his or her heart. If David did these things, I don't expect you to forgive them, forgive him, as this would be too much to ask of you. The only thing I do ask of you is to understand the pain and the agony that is within me, knowing that the pain and agony of all you parents. I ask of you not to burden us with your feelings towards David. By us, I mean all those people who have known David and me. We too are victims of this tragedy. I will live with this heartache for the rest of my life.
Upon learning that it is allegedly he, what was your immediate reaction, and how did you get the news?
I cried.
I think that's enough.
Don Cladstrup, CBS News, New York.
Later in the day, Nathan Berkowitz went to the hospital to visit his son, their first meeting in a year.
David Berkowitz, Sidney Biddle Barrows, Jean Harris. Their crimes ranged from mayhem to murder, but there is a common thread. All of these criminals sold their stories to publishers or movie producers, and all have been targeted by a New York state law that takes such profits and turns them over to their victims, a law that is now being challenged in federal court. It's called the Son of Sam law. It dates back to 1977, when David Berkowitz was terrorizing New York City. It was thought the Son of Sam could make millions selling his story, so the law was passed to take that money from criminals like Berkowitz and give it to their victims.
I do owe him something. Of course, nothing I can do could be undone.
There's a sense of injustice on the part of the public that a person who commits such heinous crimes should benefit from the crimes that he committed.
Under the Son of Sam law, the New York Crime Victims Board has had its successes taking book and movie money away from criminals, most notably in the case of the Dog Day Afternoon bank robbery, where the hostages shared about $100,000 in profits. But the Son of Sam law is now in jeopardy. A challenge is being mounted not from criminals, but from publishers who claim the law violates the First Amendment and freedom of speech.
The existence of these laws has caused a lot of second thinking with respect to publishing projects, and has, without a doubt in my mind, caused some publishing projects never to get off the ground.
But the law hasn't stopped several high-profile criminals from telling and selling their stories. Stranger in Two Worlds, Jean Harris relates how she shot Scarsdale diet doctor Herman Tarnauer. Wise Guy, the story of mobster Henry Hill, the book at the center of the challenge to the Son of Sam law. And Trading Secrets, the insider trading tale of former Wall Street Journal reporter R. Foster Winans. The Crime Victims Board is going after the money earned by all of these criminal authors.
There's nothing in the Constitution says that he has to earn money from depicting those crimes.
But R. Foster Winans argues that without financial incentive, important stories will go untold.
It's to our advantage to have more knowledge about why people do these things and maybe how they can be prevented in the future.
Already there has been one successful challenge to the Son of Sam law. Sydney Biddle Barrows, the Mayflower Madam, won a court battle arguing that her crime, running a high-priced call girl service, had no victims. She gets to keep the money from an upcoming TV movie and her best-selling book. As for the Son of Sam himself, David Berkowitz found a loophole that exempted him from the very law named after him. That loophole has since been closed, and several of his victims, like Robert Violani, who was shot in the eye, have successfully sued for their share of $100,000 in profits.
It can never bring back my eyesight, the money. Can't be replaced. But I feel I should be compensated a lot more than what, we will be getting compensated for.
The outcome of the legal action against the Son of Sam law could have far-reaching implications. Nearly 40 states and the federal government have passed similar laws, using the New York law as a model. CBS Morning News continues now. It is 22 minutes after the hour.